All right, Braves fans, let's get rolling. I'm George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. Guys, awesome to be back with you. And what's really awesome is that baseball has started back in full swing in spring training. The Braves are at Northport. Everybody's there, and everybody's playing in games. And I know it's still technically February. I'm coming to you guys on Leap Day. February, March is tomorrow, but it feels like spring when I get to watch baseball. And I was able to watch a game today, so that is just really fun stuff for sure. And I'm sure you guys probably feel the same way out there when regular season games start. It's just a whole nother level of excitement. But that will be here before we know it. And honestly, even though it's very early, the signs are very positive in a lot of ways for the Braves. The main thing with spring training, obviously, you hope everybody gets ready correctly and prepares well. But the big thing is health, and I think that is the biggest. I mean, you can't really control that much, but I think it's the biggest X factor for the Braves this season. If they stay healthy, we know this team is tremendously talented on paper, and not just on paper. I mean, they've done it in a lot of different ways on the field the last few years. So Anthopoulos has done a great job of constructing this team. Um, I think the additions of Chris Sale and Jared Kelenic are going to really show up this year. I think Sale is the more sure thing, but Kelenic has a really high ceiling. I wouldn't say Sale is a sure thing in terms of health, but in terms of performance, if he's on the mound, right, he's going to be good. Um, and Kelenic, yeah, I really like this guy. I think he's going to figure it out in Atlanta. I don't have any proof or evidence of that. It's just a feeling of the kind of situation he's walking into. It's just as good as it could get for a young player. So, all that in mind, this episode of State of the Braves is going to be a preview of the Braves infield and what I think is to come this season for each of the Braves infielders. We will include catchers in this episode. Next episode, we will focus on the outfield and DH positions, and I'm excited for that group as well. But we're going to focus on the infield in this episode. Before we get there, let's just talk about spring training just for a minute. It has begun, and it really already has reminded us in just a few games how good the Atlanta Braves really are. Michael Harris, the second, has showed up ready to roll. If possible, he's in better shape this season than last. We know that last season was a struggle in the beginning with some nagging injuries that he had to overcome, some real struggles at the plate. But his last 4 months were spectacular, and I'm just hoping that Harris can get going from the start, full health, and I think the sky's the limit for Harris. I had a lot of high expectations of him last year. Possible top 10 MVP kind of guy. I still think that could happen this year, and I really look for Michael Harris to have an all-star type of season, have a Gold Glove type of season. We can't guarantee those things will happen. But we know that he is capable, and he's already launched two massive home runs, and I think he's played in 3 games. He's showing the power, and yeah, he might be in better shape this year than he was even last year, and that's saying something because the guy is ripped. He's in shape. Chris Sale made his Braves debut. Very impressive. Of course, spring training, you start slow, so he only pitched 2 innings, but it was 2 perfect innings, 4 strikeouts, 95-mile-an-hour fastball. That slider is electric. It always has been. It still is. And it's just a reminder, Braves fans, we haven't been able to see Chris Sale as much when he's pitched most of his career with the White Sox and the Red Sox. And then, of course, he's been on and off injured for the last several years. So you just kind of forget until you see him. It's like, oh, yeah, this guy is elite. And we just keep saying it. As long as he's on the mound, he's going to be really, really good for the Braves. Spencer Strider debuted. He has pitched in 2 games now this spring. He debuted a fastball, or sorry, we know the fastball. He debuted a curveball that he's added to his fastball slider mix. I saw it today. It looked good. I mean, it's a new pitch for him, so I'm not expecting it to be elite, but it is a different angle, a different look, a different shape to the pitch, and of course, a little less velocity than his slider. So I do like that he's including this. I think it has a likelihood to be more effective than the changeup that he tinkered with last year. And man, I look, he's still young. We have to remind ourselves of that. He stormed onto the scene and has been electric from the beginning. His ERA was a little high last year, had some of those blow up starts. I look for him to have fewer of those this year and really probably be in the Cy Young um, talk all season long. And then already the other thing that's been on display is the depth of the bullpen. We have a lot of arms, a lot of electric arms coming out of the bullpen for the Braves. It's not certain who's going to break camp with the Braves, but there's no shortage of depth. We, I think, are the envy of baseball in that regard. All right, so guys, let's go ahead and get into what this episode is really about today, and that is the Braves infield. And we're just going to review how good the Braves infield really was the whole on the whole last season. 2023 total. So this is as a group, and we are including the catchers in this. The Braves infield hit a total of 173 home runs as a group, a batting average of 270, a wins above replacement combination of 23.3. And then, on defense, Murphy, Darno, and Riley, and Arcia all graded out as plus defenders last year. You did have Ozzie and Olson grade out negatively. They have been positive defenders for most of their careers, so I don't know if that's an outlier, but it is something interesting that I think they both would like to bounce back with, and obviously it could make them even that much more valuable to the team if they can do that. Um, All-stars at every single one of these positions. 5 all-stars. You'll recall that if you watched the all-star game. Of course, Arcia was the biggest surprise of this group, but what an awesome thing for the Braves to be able to look back on. It's just a huge team accomplishment. Remember Ron Washington and kind of his pride of what that group was able to do last year. And the other thing about this group is they don't really take days off. Arcia was injured for about 20 or 30 games last year, but everybody else is playing pretty much every day. They're incredibly consistent, and you just know what you're going to get with this group. All right, so let's go ahead and go into some team projections for infield so we can kind of see where the Braves are likely to rank um, across Major League Baseball for 2024. So these projections, of course, I use Fangraphs. There are other systems I could have used out there, but Fangraphs is as good as any. So the Braves as a group, remember, they had 23.3 WAR last season as a group. Fangraphs projects them at 19.2 next year. So that is down from last year as projection, but projections typically work that way. They're always going to be a little safe on what they project. Now, they do have the Dodgers at slightly above the Braves as the highest projection for any infield in baseball at 19.3. And look, this is going to be a theme all season where the Braves and Dodgers are just in a league of their own compared to the rest of Major League Baseball. They're almost always 1 and 2, no matter what category you look at. And when you're this close in a projection, obviously you can argue either way which infield is better. Just as a reminder, the Dodgers infield is made up of Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Gavin Lux at shortstop, Max Muncy at third, and Will Smith at catcher. Now, the thing that maybe jumps off the page a little bit, of course, if you haven't heard, is Mookie Betts. It has been announced that he's moving full-time to second base. So in the past, he would have shown up as a right fielder in projections. So this gives them a bump in terms of that projection number. But again, obviously that is a very good infield, but there is some weakness there. Max Muncy hit under 200 last season. Gavin Lux has been injured. He's still a young player. How good is he going to be? He's probably the weakest part of that group. So I like the Braves as a whole. I think the Braves are a little more balanced. Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts are 2 of the top 5 best position players in baseball. So you can throw those 2 into that group, and it's going to weigh it a little bit more. Now, in terms of the rest of baseball, the Orioles come in at 18.4 WAR projection. It's very much a group effort. I I'll be honest, I didn't pay as much attention to the Orioles last season until near the end of the season. I know that they are incredibly young and incredibly talented. Um, so yes, they are good, but being so young, maybe there's some volatility in that projection. The Rangers come in at 18.2. So I do think the Rangers are probably under under the Braves and Dodgers are the third best infield in baseball in my mind. So that's Nathaniel Lowe, Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Josh Young, and Jonah Heim. And they performed obviously incredibly well last year, won the World Series. I do think the biggest question mark is, can Corey Seager be healthy? And that's been his issue pretty much his entire career. But when he's on the field, he's really, really good. Just for some fun, the Phillies come in fairly high in these projections, but still uh, almost 3 full WAR off of the Braves with Bryce Harper, Stott, Trey Turner, Alec Bohm, and JT Realmuto. So obviously very solid. The Braves are going to have to take on the Phillies at some point this year and hopefully bury them. But that is where the Phillies come in. But it's just a reminder how good the Braves infield really is. Now, let's look at each Braves infielder. With this analysis, we are going to look at what these infielders did in 2023. I want to look at their Fangraphs projections for 2024. I'll do a quick overview of what intangibles each player brings to the clubhouse, and then I'll give you my own projections for each player. Okay, so we're going to start with Sean Murphy, obviously catcher. His 2023 performance, he hit 251 with a 365 on base and a 478 slugging percentage. He hit 21 home runs, and per Fangraphs, that was good for a 4.2 WAR season. You know, you'll remember Murphy was in a lot of MVP talks midway through the season, but he had a very unbalanced offensive season. It's just true, right? He started out on a crazy, pretty much unsustainable hot streak, and then he really petered out at the second half of the season. He showed what he's capable of. I mean, he showed at his best he can be an awesome offensive player. Now, he did admit this offseason that he got tired in the Georgia heat, middle of the summer. He kind of wasn't ready for that. Remember, he was coming from Oakland, and that is a totally different climate and environment to play in. And I'm sure he's the type of guy who's always going to put on the pads and go out there and play and not complain. But it must have impacted him in some ways. He does have a long swing. I wonder if you're just a little tired or a little banged up, that sort of thing, it could throw off your game just enough. Slow down your bat just enough. And I guess that's what happened to Murphy. Perhaps he acclimates better this season. I would expect that. Perhaps Snit rests him a bit more on the hotter days of the summer and gives d'Arnaud a few more at bats. I actually think that would be better, just kind of balancing d'Arnaud and Murphy. I think it would help them both a little bit more. d'Arnaud also had a down year offensively last year. I'll talk about him in a second. But yeah, I mean, ultimately Murphy got about 100 more at bats than d'Arnaud. I think Murphy should play more than d'Arnaud, but maybe it should be more like 50 more at bats or 70 more at bats. I know that's maybe splitting hairs a little bit, but just a couple extra days here and there for Murphy could go a long way. So maybe a bit more balance would help him out in 2024. So Fangraphs projections for Murphy is pretty close offensively to what he did last year, but maybe a little down. So they have him projected at 251, same exact average from last year. 345 on base, so a little lower. 464 slugging percentage, 18 home runs, so a dip in home runs, and a 3.5 WAR season. So that is a little bit less performance from Murphy. Now, what he did with Atlanta, even though he had an uneven season last year, it was probably his best offensive season overall. but it does feel like he is capable of more than what Fangraphs is projecting. I think Fangraphs clearly sees Murphy as a slightly above average offensive player who brings great defense. I think they also expect him to get slightly fewer at bats next season, which I do think is correct. But yeah, I think he has more potential in the tank offensively than what they are projecting. Now, in terms of what Murphy brings to the clubhouse, obviously he learned the Braves and the Braves learned him last year. We saw this with Matt Olson in year one of him being in Atlanta. It's kind of a feel it out type of year. I think Murphy is a quiet guy who's just going to be a really hard worker. You're never going to have to worry about him and work ethic. I mean, he's going to lead the way in that regard. So more of a leader in terms of just how he acts and what he does to prepare every day. So his work ethic, I think, is definitely a healthy example for the team. Now, my expectations for Murphy, I expect Murphy and Snit to figure out his playing time a little bit better in year two to keep him fresh. Maybe he has not so many peaks and valleys this season, but I think he actually might bring a slightly better offensive year this year than he did last year. So yeah, I think he's due for kind of figure this out a little bit and get a little more consistent performance. So my projection for Murphy is 265, 360 with a 475 slugging percentage and 24 home runs. Now, that being said, the one thing when Murphy was going really well offensively, he had a tremendous eye at the plate. And I think when his bat slowed down, some of that just went away. So I particularly think that Murphy is a high on base guy. That's one of the keys, I think, to his whole game. So yeah, I have his on base percentage at 360. Fangraphs has it at 345. I do think that's low for Murphy. And yeah, I expect him to continue to hit with power. And even though he might get a few less at bats, I think he's going to hit more home runs in 2024. All right, let's move on to Travis d'Arnaud. Like I said, I think it's likely that while they might not get exactly even at bats or even playing time, I do think d'Arnaud is going to get a little more time this year than last. And remember, d'Arnaud did have some injury that probably threw off this playing time balance a little bit more than the Braves would have liked last season. So his 2023 performance was definitely down offensively for his standards last year. He hit 225 with a 288 on base, 397 slugging percentage, 11 home runs, and that was good for a 0.9 WAR season. His 2024 projections are to hit 248, a 308 on base, and a 427 slugging percentage with 13 home runs and a 1.5 WAR season. So Fangraphs sees 2023 as a slight aberration in terms of being a down year. I think that is true. I think that several things happened to harm Travis's playing time. It was the least he's played consistently in a long time, on top of having an injury in the middle of the year. So I also think Fangraphs expects him to get about 50 more at bats, 50 more plate appearances next season, which I do as well. So yeah, I think their projection is pretty good. And now that being said, they're viewing d'Arnaud's projection or d'Arnaud's what he's going to do on the field to go up, and they project Murphy to go down. So it's still, as a tandem, they're still seeing pretty much the same output from these two guys. I see an uptick a little bit. Now let's talk about what Travis brings to the clubhouse. He is a clear leader in the clubhouse. Everybody knows that he's kind of one of the cornerstone pieces at this point for the Braves. His presence is highly valued. In fact, many see him as maybe a future manager one day. And he has shown a great deal of unselfishness when Murphy came in. I mean, he just embraced him and really, had the foresight to do that and to see that it could even maybe extend d'Arnaud's career by having Murphy there. Now, my expectations this season for Travis, Travis was one of the few Braves in 2023 to have a down offensive year. again, I think the drop in playing time was the main reason for that, and the fact that he missed some time. I expect him to have a better season. I expect that he is probably motivated to bounce back. I do think Fangraphs is pretty close to what he's going to do. Now, Travis is 35 years old, so that's the caveat here. But I think he might even do slightly better than what Fangraphs is saying. So I'm going to project Travis hits 255 with a 315 on base percentage and a 440 slugging percentage with 14 home runs. And that would be a great bounce back season for him. All right, let's move on to first base and, of course, All-Star and MVP candidate Matt Olson. So in 2023, we know that this was a historic season in terms of the power that Olson provided for the Braves. He hit 283 with a 389 on base percentage, a 604 slugging percentage, and an incredible 54 home runs. This was good for a 6.7 WAR season. Almost all of these, in fact, I think all of them were career highs for Olson. Because they were career highs, Fangraphs is going to project lower. They just simply are, because they're going to go off of what Olson has done throughout his entire career. So the 2024 projections for Olson, Fangraphs has him at 264 batting average with a 366 on base percentage, a 529 slugging percentage, and 40 home runs in a 4.2 WAR season. I do think that's too low. Fangraphs doesn't seem to buy Olson's 2023. It's as if it didn't happen. So, that's the problem with projection models. I think sometimes is they have a hard time when a player has a spike like this in performance of knowing what to do with it and the reasons for it. And, so projection models are limited. They don't take into account maybe a player makes a career altering adjustment at the plate. And I think Olson might have done that last year. He really seemed to figure out how to let the ball travel. I know he adjusted his hand placement some. There were several little tweaks that he made that I'm hoping, obviously, he can just bring directly into 2024 and just go from there. Now, what Olson brings to the clubhouse, steady leadership. We have kind of learned that he has a really good sense of humor. I mean, this guy is a really good dude. Guys definitely respect him a lot. He seems to be universally liked. And and now he brings a ton of confidence, and he has totally removed himself from the whole replacing Freddie Freeman talk. Man, to his credit, that could have gone so much worse if he had he had an okay first season, but if he'd had a down year last season, it would have gotten really hard for him. But he flipped that on its head, and now we're not really even talking about Freddie anymore. So that is all Matt Olson. It is a huge accomplishment for him to be able to even just do that. And recent reports is that he's taking Jared Kelenic under his wing. They've done some hitting together, and I can't think of a better partner for Kelenic than Matt Olson. So my expectations for Olson this season, I would say, let's put him somewhere in between last year, which was his career year, and his Fangraphs projections. Perhaps 2023 was Olson's peak year. I've heard a lot of people say that. I understand the idea behind that because it was so just out of this world. But I still think he figured something out that was concrete and could help him continue to reduce his strikeout rate and put the bat on the ball more. And obviously he has so much power that if he's making consistent contact, a lot of those balls are going to leave the yard, especially at Truist Park with that right field tall wall. So I think he'll hit about 275, 380 on base percentage, 550 slugging percentage. All of these are higher than what Fangraphs has. It's right about in the middle. And I think he'll hit 46 home runs. So, okay, maybe he won't. Maybe he will. Maybe he will hit 50 home runs again. But I think 46 is darn good. And if we have all the other Braves in the middle of the lineup doing what we know they can do, 46 home runs from Matt Olson is just fine. All right, let's move on to second base and our beloved Ozzie Albies. So 2023 rankings or stats for Albies. He hit 280 with a 336 on base percentage and a 513 slugging percentage with 33 home runs and a 4.0 WAR season. This was also a career year for Ozzie, maybe just slightly, but all of those numbers were a little higher than what he's done over his career. So Fangraphs projections do reflect that. They think he's going to drop a little bit. So they have him hitting 275 with a 330 on base percentage and a 483 slugging percentage and hitting 27 home runs. And that would be good for a 3.6 WAR season. So again, I think Fangraphs views Ozzie's 2023 as slightly above his typical year and expects his 2024 to be a slight regression backwards. Obviously, this could happen. I totally understand the projection, but I do think Ozzie's 2022, where he was not having a good start to his season and then got hurt, I think that's probably weighing down these projections a little bit. Now, what Ozzie brings to the table, we love Ozzie, right? He brings great positive attitude to the team, youthful exuberance. He's a breath of fresh air every day. He loves baseball, and he has a great influence, a great positive influence on every teammate, and it's just obvious. And I think it will be interesting to see if Ozzie steps up maybe even more since Ron Washington is gone. I know he will miss Wash, but yeah, I love having Ozzie on the team and in the clubhouse. Now, my expectations for Ozzie is I think he's just coming into his prime years, right? He's only 27 years old. I think he's likely to repeat what he did last season. And I'm willing to bet that he wants to turn around his negative defensive numbers. I bet that he's walking into camp really wanting to have a Gold Glove caliber type of defensive season to turn around those defensive metrics. So that's honestly how Ozzie could go from a 4 WAR player to a 5 WAR player, which I think is possible. So I'm projecting him to stay about where he was last year, 275 average, 330 on base, 510 slugging percentage. So I'm basically going with the Fangraphs projections, but saying he's going to show a little more power than what they project. 32 home runs. And even though for the rest of the guys, I'm not doing WAR projections because it's hard to project WAR and calculate WAR, but I think with a better defensive season, he could improve his WAR number from last year, like a 4.5 type of WAR season. I think Ozzie is certainly capable of doing that. All right, let's move on to shortstop and Orlando Arcia. His 2023 was his best full season. Remember where he was coming from, basically a utility player. He had a couple years that he had to spend back down in AAA. So everything he gave the Braves was a surprise and a pleasant surprise last year. He hit 264 with a 321 on base percentage and a 420 slugging percentage, 17 home runs, and this was good for a 2.0 WAR season. Remember, 2 WAR seasons are basically like you're a starter, right? You are starter quality in the big leagues. And so good on Arcia because I was not real high on Arcia when the Braves made the decision to go with him last year. Now the 2024 Fangraphs projections has him hitting has a downswing for him, hitting 251 with a 314 on base percentage and a 406 slugging percentage with 18 home runs and a 1.7 WAR season, so slightly down from last year. Now, what I will say is this obviously would be a step back from 2023, but Arcia is a career 247 hitter with a career WRC plus of just 79. So basically, he's proven to be a below average hitter throughout his career, and he was an average hitter by every metric last season. So which one do you believe? Do you believe the Arcia before 2023, or do you believe in Arcia of 2023? So Fangraphs obviously still thinks he will be a fringe quality starter. They're not viewing him falling off a cliff, but they're definitely saying he's not going to be quite as good as he was last year. Now, what Arcia brings to the clubhouse, I will say this. Everyone seems to love Orlando Arcia. I think this probably helps him get maybe more opportunities than some other people, but seems like a really solid guy. Fun, positive, joking. He fits totally in with Ozzy Albies and Ronald and that whole crew. So he's a positive dude in the clubhouse, and that's really important. Now, my expectations of Arcia, I do have doubts that Arcia can repeat his production from last season. He had this surprise All-Star start. His offense after the All-Star break just fell off a cliff. So on August 1st, I just want to remind you guys what happened. On August 1st, Arcia was hitting 295. He was just coming off of his All-Star appearance. But from August 1st to the end of the season, he hit just 218 the rest of the way. So the question is, who is he? 218 is much more in line with his career batting. 295 seems like a pretty hot, heavy, spike in his performance. Now, I have no doubt that he's working with Kevin Seitzer a lot. I'm sure that there are some adjustments that he's made to improve his approach and all those things. It's just a matter of can he sustain that over the next several seasons. I think the Braves are going to continue to ride Orlando Arcia as long as he's providing solid defense and not a total offensive black hole. So even if he does have a down year offensively, I think Arcia is the starting shortstop for the Braves for the foreseeable future. But I will say this, it would not shock me if this ends up being Arcia's last year as a Brave, or at least as the Braves' full-time starter. I mean, he's getting paid like a backup. So the Braves don't have to feel fully dedicated to him. They can kind of play it year to year. Been hearing a lot of really positive things about Nacho Alvarez, the 20-year-old shortstop prospect for the Braves. I do think he needs to continue to develop defensively. So he's probably not major league ready. But if he continues to develop this season and proves that he can play shortstop, he is a dark horse for me in terms of just a potential replacement for Arcia in 2024. Or maybe, if there were some kind of injury, maybe he steps up there. So my expectations for Arcia are lower. I think he's probably going to hit around 245 with a 300 on base percentage and a 400 slugging. These are lower actually than the Fangraphs projections. And I have him hitting 13 home runs. So yeah, I have him kind of falling back to earth. Maybe some of this is due to injury. He has been injured from time to time. Or maybe it's just poor performance and then somebody kind of comes in and replaces him or plays part-time at times. But that's how I see it for Arcia. All right, now at third base, we of course have Austin Riley, and his 2023 was really good. He hit 281 with a 345 on base percentage and a 516 slugging percentage. He had 37 home runs, and this was good for a 5.2 WAR season. One thing I've been really pleased with this offseason is Riley's really starting to get some national credit for being perhaps the best third baseman in baseball, and I think that's legitimate. I think it should be discussed. He's been incredibly consistent the last 3 years, and he's still young and in his prime by a long shot. So I expect many good things from Riley in 2024 and in years to come. Now, Fangraphs for next year has him at 278, 349 on base, a 517 slugging percentage, which is all right around what he did last year, and 36 home runs. So all of this is basically right in line with 2023, but they have him for a 4.4 WAR season compared to a 5.2 WAR season. The only thing I can figure out with that is they think he's going to have a much worse defensive year. Remember, Riley had his first positive defensive season last year. And so they must think his defense is going to fall off the map again and that was an aberration. But Riley came in to this spring training talking a lot about wanting to win a Gold Glove. That defense was really on his mind and was a focus of his, and it clearly has been for his entire career. He's gotten better and better over there at third base. So I actually don't see his defense falling off. Maybe it's slightly, by the metrics is worse this coming season, but I think he's going to be just fine. Now, what Riley brings to the table, again, we have another steady, hard worker, good guy. He may, in some ways, has replaced Freddie Freeman in the clubhouse, just being as a guy who's been there a while and is going to hold guys accountable a little bit more. Freddie kind of got a reputation of being a pretty hard-nosed dude who would confront you about some things. I don't know that Riley's that. But I do think he's someone that everybody respects in the clubhouse. He isn't the only leader on the team. I mean, this is really a team full of leaders, but his steady presence, I think, is a really big part of maintaining these high expectations on players. Now, my expectations, like I said, I think Fangraphs, well, here's one thing. Fangraphs has, for the last 3 seasons, really undervalued and underprojected Austin Riley. And I think it's just going to happen again. Maybe it's due to his early career struggles, and that just still weighs him down in terms of projections. But he's also, like I said, I mean, I think he's dedicated to uh, continuing to improve his defense. And so if he does that, it really keeps his floor pretty high in terms of what his WAR is going to be year to year. Anyone who watches Austin Riley knows that he is an MVP type of offensive player that just goes through some valleys throughout the year. So he's not super consistent within the year, but year to year he's been really consistent. So if he can limit those offensive valleys, he could have an MVP year. I mean, I think it is within his abilities to do that. And I think he will start to do that this year as he is now really maturing into a great, great player. So my projection for Riley is 290 batting average with a 350 on base and a 530 slugging percentage. This would be a slightly better offensive year than he had last year. I think he's going to eclipse the 40 home run mark for the first time. I have him with 41 home runs, and I think he's going to continue to play the level of defense he played last year, positive defensive value. So with all that, that would be Austin Riley's best season to date. All right, now let's look at the group projection as we are comparing what I think will happen to what did happen in 2023 with this group. So I have, as a whole, their batting average going down slightly. Some of this is due to Arcia dropping off. And then I also had Olson and Riley dropping off batting average wise just a little bit. I do have Murphy, Travis d'Arnaud, and Riley going up a little bit in their batting average. But as a whole, I do have their group batting average going down. I have their home run total pretty much staying the same. Olson and Riley dropping slightly. Olson dropping a little, by 8, but he hit so many last year. Arcia dropping by quite a few, and then I still have Murphy, Travis, and Riley going up. So as a whole, right, I do have Murphy, d'Arnaud, and Riley improving offensively. The other three maybe dropping slightly. All that being said, I still think as a group, this is the best infield in baseball. So, worst case scenario for the Braves infield, how things could go bad. Bad is relative with this remarkable group. I could see a scenario where maybe Ozzy's batting average really takes a dive, and like I've already said, I do think that's already likely to happen with Arcia. Travis d'Arnaud's age could maybe catch up with him, and he's just kind of cooked, and we don't see another really good offensive year from d'Arnaud. But I still think the other guys are just solid across the board no matter what. I still expect potential top 10 performances from Olson and Riley, and maybe even Murphy. I think he has that potential. How things could go really great for this group. Maybe last year's performance for Olson wasn't his peak. Maybe he's just starting to realize what he can really do. Maybe he can repeat that, and Riley takes an even bigger step towards superstardom. Maybe we haven't seen the best of Austin Riley yet. And Ozzy probably does have a 5 or 6 WAR season in him at least once. So maybe this year is when he takes that step and really does it. I mean, I think it could happen. He didn't have quite as great of a right-handed season last year, even though we know that is his better side. So if he continues to do what he did last year from the left side, which was improvement, and he does something great from the right side, yeah, Ozzy with some better defense could have a tremendous year. I think it is certainly possible. So my conclusion, look, all 5 position players for the Braves last year in the infield made the All-Star team. While that is not likely to happen this year, I don't think RC is ever going to make the All-Star team again. But I think a minimum of Olson, Riley, and Ozzy will make it again this year. And I think Murphy certainly um, has a good chance to do that as well. Um, Another thing I would like to just mention, I think Nacho Alvarez is a wild card this season. If an injury were to occur really at any infield position, I think Nacho, at least by mid-year, could be the primary go-to guy for the Braves. Now, if Olson were to go down, I would think that maybe Riley could slide to first and Nacho could go to third base. Um, I'm assuming some things, but from everything I hear, Nacho Alvarez has a great bat, a really good glove. There's question marks about his ability to play shortstop, and especially, does he have, the quickness to play shortstop? But he's pretty much major league ready at third base or even second base right now. So I know there's a couple other backup guys who are available, but I really think if something were to happen injury wise, Nacho could be a really important part of this Braves team. Look, I mentioned it already. The Dodgers and Braves, they're going to fight it out this entire season in a lot of different ways, including who has the best infield. But I think the Braves defense, if they improve that, if Olson and Ozzy improve their defense, if Riley proves that last year wasn't a fluke defensively, that could be how they really separate themselves from the Dodgers. All right, guys. So on the next episode, as we analyze the Braves outfield, we'll see that there really is no drop off for the Braves outside of the infield. The infield is great. The outfield is great too. And dang, this team is really good. So really excited for this season. Excited to see this infield prove that they are the best in baseball. And guys, I'll be back soon to talk about this outfield and Ronald Acuna Jr. and Michael Harris and Jared Kelenic. And we'll talk about Marcelo Ozuna too at the DH position. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.